Welcome to SaharaTV. My name is Rodolph Okonkwo. With me here in the studio is a special guest, Professor Okey Ndibe. For the past 2 years, we've been trying to get him back to SaharaTV. Today, he agreed to appear on our show. Professor Ndibe, welcome back to SaharaTV.
Thank you very much, Rudolph.
So, it's been a long time.
Yes.
What happened?
Well, I've been fighting with SaharaTV, actually.
People would like to hear this.
Well, what happened was, about 2 years ago, SaharaTV booked me for an interview. And I think the interview was to take place at 1 p.m. And SaharaTV kept me waiting for at least 2 hours. And eventually, when they got me on, the interview lasted for 2 or 3 minutes and they stopped it. So I said, they had wasted my entire day, and I said, as a policy, I was not going to appear on TV, on SaharaTV, for 10 years.
Wow.
So it's a tribute to your powers of persuasion that you convinced me to come back.
Well, thank you so much. We are glad that you're here, and we are sorry. I mean, most of our guests, we can relate to what you just said, but we are doing better now, and we're happy to have you. So the last 2 years, your life has been transformed. You wrote a book that is a best-selling book, and it's taking you around the world. Can you tell us a little bit about what that experience has been?
Well, I feel like the same person, but I've been fortunate. I wrote a novel that got published January of 2014 called Foreign Gods, Inc. And that novel received extraordinary reviews, both here in the US and in the UK and elsewhere, in Africa. And as you rightly said, I've been on the road ever since. I've been to all parts of the United States. I've been to Europe several times, and I've been to Africa several times, giving readings and talks. So I'm delighted that the book became a great success, but I feel as the same person that I always was. Yes.
We're going to talk more about the book and African literature, but first I want to talk about politics, because most people know you as this columnist for several newspapers, including Sahara Reporters. You just came back from giving a talk, I believe, here in New York, and you came into the studio here. And I want you to tell us, what did you tell them about Nigerian politics? Because we are now 2 weeks to the election, a big election that will determine the future of the country.
Well, I was invited to City University of New York to speak on a panel that discussed the elections in Nigeria. There were 4 of us on the panel. And basically, my take is to express my regret, that the elections are going to change very little fundamentally. That Nigerian politics, and especially governance, has been arranged around the idea of empowering a few individuals to steal the resources of the rest of us. And my argument is, and I know a lot of people don't like this argument, but my argument is that the APC and the PDP represent kind of Siamese twins. That the 2 parties are obsessed with the same idea of the dispossession of the Nigerian people, the idea of looting as the essence of governance. And my regret that the progressive forces in Nigeria, the progressive elements in Nigeria, were unable to coalesce around the idea of finding a third viable alternative to, I think, the 2 least attractive parties in Nigeria. And so I think that the elections, if the PDP loses the elections, I think Nigerians are going to get a kind of psychic boost because, as we know, the PDP has threatened to rule us, and the word is rule, not lead. They've threatened to rule Nigeria for 60 years, And the PDP has brought very little in terms of vision and understands very little in terms of what it means to run a country. So I think that if the PDP loses the elections, that Nigerians are going to have a moment of great emotional exuberance. But I suspect that very quickly we're going to realize that we've been sold a dud. I think that Buhari, as president, is going to bring with him perhaps a legacy and an example of personal restraint, an absence of an interest in material, obscene material accumulation. But let's not forget that after all, somebody like Shehu Shagari, when he was president, brought the same kind of disposition to the presidency. Everybody acknowledged that Buhari Shagari was not personally corrupt, but that did not stop Buhari from running, presiding over a government that was really noted for the rampancy of corruption.
You meant Shagari?
Shagari, I'm sorry. Yeah. So that did not mean that Shagari did not preside over a government that was notorious for the rampancy of corruption. And so my suspicion is that we're going to waste another 4 years in which Nigerians are going to return to the same questions of disillusionment, of disenchantment with the political process. And by the way, what Nigeria needs is not really a strong man or a man of great moral example. What Nigeria needs is some fundamental restructuring. And neither political party has addressed that question. But I think that if Nigeria is going to survive, that question is going to be put on the table. Okay,
I will get to that, but I want you to consider what should happen if Jonathan should win re-election, because you talked about if Buhari should win, there will be that kind of a sense of that something might change and nothing will change. What if Jonathan should win re-election?
Well, let me again sort of finish with Buhari. I think that whichever of the two candidates that are regarded as major wins, that there is going to be, I suspect, a great deal of violence. If Buhari wins, I think that there is going to be an unsettlement of the Niger Delta, the oil-producing area. If Jonathan wins, I think that there will be an intensification, I suspect, of the kind of violence that we've seen in the northern part of the country. Okay. And I suspect that it's going to spread to other parts of the country. If Jonathan wins, it's going to be bleak. But at least Nigerians will know what to expect. Nigerians know that Jonathan is basically a president who doesn't give a damn. They know that he's a president whose commitment to a transformational agenda is simply lip deep. They know that Jonathan, as a president, is in over his head. The man simply doesn't begin to understand the first principles in governance. And so that's why I continue to regret that we somehow did not work ourselves up into having a better alternative than these two candidates and these two parties especially, which for me represent simply two sides of the same coin.
Now, the president promised that if he should win, he will implement the reports of the constitutional reform and put in a new constitution. Would that be satisfactory to you if he should win and he does that?
If he does that, that's going to be a major, because I talked about the restructuring of Nigeria, so that's going to be a major step. Nigeria's federalism is a very stilted, a very inorganic, and a very simply corrupt even federalism. We run a system where the man in Abuja basically determines much of what happens in the rest of the country. And so if we implement the results of the national conference, imperfect as those recommendations are, I think that that will move Nigeria in the right direction. But it's talk, you know. We know that in the past, Obasanjo has held a conference, Abacha held his own conference, and often these conferences are simply used cynically to advance the interests of the man in power at the time. So I don't really take Jonathan seriously. Remember, he's had this. He's had the report for 8 or more months in his kitty.
Yeah.
And so, if he wanted to move the country in the direction of looking seriously at that report of the national conference, he could have easily began movement in that direction. But he received the report and that was it. And so, of course, he realizes that it's a selling point in some electoral zones, and so he's using that card. But I don't expect, Jonathan has not shown me anything to not inspire confidence in me that he's a kind of leader who is capable of bold political moves. And I think that the idea of trying to sell the recommendations of the national conference would be a bold move. And you know, I think that Jonathan merely recognizes that idea, the idea of restructuring Nigeria, sort of plays well in certain electoral areas, and so he's exploiting that issue. But I don't expect him, knowing his antecedents, to pursue the matter in any serious manner.
But his supporters are saying that he will need this mandate for a second term when he doesn't have to worry about running again to be able to do those things. Do you buy that argument?
You know, that argument has been used again and again. It's a sort of argument that has a particular kind of traction in Nigeria, and I don't know why, because there are very few Nigerian leaders, if any, who have really exemplified this to be true. Let's remember that when Jonathan was running, when he was acting president, when Yar'Adua was sick, Jonathan simply did nothing. Then when he was running for president, some of us raised the point that he'd not done anything as acting president. And the argument was used by some Nigerians that Jonathan decided to do nothing because it was on somebody else's time, Yar'Adua's time, and that he was waiting to be given his own 4 years before he would begin to lead. And some people were impressed by that kind of argument, and I found it rather peculiar. For me, it's like if you hired somebody and said to the person, you are on probation for 6 months. If you do well in 6 months, then you are going to be hired permanently. And the person goes to sleep. And 6 months later, you say to the person, hey, you have not performed at all. And the person says to you, I'm waiting for you to confirm me, then I'll start working. And so the whole argument that Jonathan is waiting for a second term in order to do what's right seems to me unconvincing. And so I think that Jonathan simply is a man who was and is unprepared for leadership. But I want to stress that having said that, I'm not saying that Buhari is prepared for leadership.
But most viewers will be wondering, so what should a voter do? If the two options are bad, which one is better? Are you recommending that they shouldn't go and vote?
No, I'm recommending that they vote. I'm recommending that people should look at other political candidates. Nigeria has about 28 political parties. I think 11 of them or so are presenting presidential candidates. Some of them have adopted one candidate or either of the two candidates, right? But I think that Nigerians ought to seriously, and I've been baffled that nobody has gone to look outside of the two candidates. Okay, somebody like Chekwas Okorie, who is one of the presidential candidates, is a man of great intelligence and a man of great experience who's been a successful businessman. But of course, Nigerians don't want to take a look at him. And there are other political candidates who are running for the presidency that we should take a hard look at.
Let me say that on SaharaTV, we've interviewed about 2 of the presidential candidates that are not known to Nigerians. But you know the mentality of Nigerians. If you're not with the major party, they basically dismiss you.
Yes.
So most people are essentially looking at these 2 candidates. Now, but let's look at you mentioned that the possibility that elections might end in violence, whoever wins. Is there any situation where you think this election will not happen? Because most people are still raising the doubts whether it's actually going to happen on the 28th.
Well, that's part of the point that I raised in my talk earlier today at the City University of New York. There is in Nigeria the things that ought to be a given are hardly ever taken for granted. Right? So it ought to be a given that elections hold on the days that they are originally scheduled. Now, Jonathan has been blamed for the postponement of the elections. There is no question that Jonathan wanted that postponement because he was losing traction quickly. And that postponement has benefited him more than it benefited any other political opponent. But having said so, it's also true that INEC truly wasn't ready. You know, PVC card collection was at very low levels in several, some parts of the country and so on. And so it's particularly unfortunate that an election we knew 4 years ago will come on a certain date this year, that our electoral commission wasn't ready. Our security agencies said they were not ready to provide security and so on, and they needed 6 weeks to battle Boko Haram. Now, for me, that's interesting what's going on, because we see actually that the Nigerian military, for the first time, is routing Boko Haram from town after town. What does that tell you? I think that what it says is that the Nigerian, exactly the point that I started with, that the Nigerian political system is arranged around the business of looting the country blind. And so governance is put to the side. But when Jonathan and the military wing of his support base saw that he might lose the election, they then said, hey, wait a minute, let's show you we can do work. And so once they started to do this, we saw the Nigerian military pushing Boko Haram away from territory after territory. So this ought to raise questions for Nigerians. Why is it that the military was complicit in a war that Boko Haram was winning easily? Boko Haram was just attacking town after town, and the military was on the retreat. What changed? I suggest that what changed is that because of the elections, people said, let's put aside stealing for now. Actually, they didn't put aside stealing because it goes on every day, but they said, let's at least, in conjunction with stealing, let's do some work. And so it behooves Nigerians to insist that they are governed, that those they put in office work for them and do not embrace simply the easy way, the easy route of stealing money.
Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we talk about Professor Ndibe's books. There are many. One of them is this Arrows of Rain, which was his first novel, which has been republished here in the United States. So we take a break. We'll be back in a few minutes.